Hello! Happy Friday. Happy Friday. Happy Friday. How is it going? Friday happy? Oh, made it through the week. The Sharkies just sent me a picture of their chicken and waffles. Oh, doesn't that look good? I'm a little jealous. We are probably going to have a pizza night. Despite the fact that it is supposedly waffle day. Come on, what are you doing? Back here. Farmos wants waffles. Mini cake. We're just. Oh, I'm out of focus. Just talking about the Sharkies. Just sent me a picture. They're having chicken and waffles for dinner. Um, there it is. Sharkies say today is waffle day, a real Swedish holiday. Look at that. That looks great. How is it? How does it taste, Sharkies? And welcome. Also, yes, hello, Mini Cake. We missed you on Wednesday. How are you doing? Sharkies say so. Every year on March 25th, I make waffles. Okay, camera, come on. Come on, camera. I'm back here. You know that. Hello. Oh, there it goes. Farmos does not have a waffle maker. Oh. You were working on Wednesday. Unfortunately. What do you do for work? Something exciting? We have a special guest on the stream, potentially. Hey, Finnegan. Hey. He's very occupied. Finnegan. Oh, I hear Bimbik. Hang on. Well, don't mind me. Ah, Finnegan. Ow. That hurt. You kind of bit me. You gotta be nice, pal. Ah, ah, ah. Here. It's there. It's on the ground. Finnegan gets his too. That's it, pal. This is Finnegan. He's my brother's dog, staying with me for a few more days. He was here from Wednesday, and he'll be here until Sunday. And then, of course, you know Benedict. Hey, good puppy. Yeah, good puppy. But Finnegan's got a Kong toy that he's chewing on, so he's a bit distracted down here. Yes, there is multiple pups. Customer service rep. I've done my time in customer service. Sharkies technically own 3 waffle makers. The one is a bit more novelty. It makes D20 shaped waffles, and it doesn't make them as crispy as the other two. Farmo says the vacuum's going to get a good workout on Monday. Yeah, after the pupper departs. Excuse me, adjusting the camera. So, yeah. Minicake missed out on some meeting up with the Dryads in the Forest of the Dryads. One moment. I'm gonna turn off the camera for just a moment. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. Just letting someone pass by. Yeah, customer service. I did a few different customer service jobs. I was in tech support for a while for computers, for HP compact computers. That was a terrible job. And then I worked at an electronics store for a while. That was all. And then after that, I got into working in film and television. Um, so, yeah, so I've got a bit of a history with customer service. Sharky says, half my job is customer service, and I don't want a robot to replace me. I mean, would you want a robot to replace you if universal basic income were a thing? If you didn't need to work in customer service in order to earn a living, would you be okay with a robot replacing you then? Many cakes in high school, so working with grumpy old people. Yeah, I feel that. I also, I suppose, technically did 3 months at Tim Hortons. It was one of my first jobs. Chucky say no, then I'd probably do my job for free. Just probably a few hours a week. Well, it's good to know that you enjoy your job enough that you would do it for free. That's nice. Working at Tim's is getting worse. It's been a little while since I worked there. Yeah, even when I worked there, it wasn't great. There's a reason it was only 3 months. Oh boy. Um, yeah. So we're currently on page 237, and the last chapter was a little awkward at times. There were a whole lot of dryads who all appeared very young despite not being very young necessarily. And one of them in particular just really wanted to kill Garion just for fun, and was a little pouty about it when she wasn't allowed to. Shucky says, I help people find books for a living and get asked questions. I seem to have a resting reference face. Your Minicake's friend got a hot drink thrown at her because she put too many sugars in. I feel like the person who threw the drink should get arrested. That kind of sounds like assault. That's not okay. Mr. Sharky was working with toddlers, so lots of squats. She got charged? Nice, that's good. That's good to hear, because that's not acceptable behavior. And I don't know why someone would think that it is. Farmos did food service for quite a few years, then retail for a while. Hopes never to work in either again if she can help it. Yeah. Yeah, is your friend okay? Did the drink, like, hit her? Did she get burned? That sounds, like, quite dangerous. People, I don't know. I'm drinking a blue drink today. Blue raspberry and lemon juice. Oh boy. I don't get people. I don't get them. She's okay. She just isn't working in fast food anymore. Yeah, it's understandable. That's oh. So, um yeah, we're getting a little closer to the end of this book. I've been looking forward to today for this chapter. This chapter is going to be a good one, I promise. Cake works at Kent, which is like a green home hardware. Okay. It's only in Atlantic Canada. Yeah, I don't think I've heard of Kent before. I've heard the name Kent, but not as an establishment. I've heard of Kent Brockman. Anyways, I think Finnegan maybe just dropped a ball or something somewhere. Oh, uh-oh. Either the name or the word ball. No? Okay. All right, that's fine. Moving on to the book now. Yeah. Yeah, I've been looking forward to this chapter. It's going to be a good one. Um, in the previous chapter, also, they met with the Queen of the Dryads, Xantha. It's Xantha, right? Xantha, I believe. Yes, Queen Xantha. No relation to the Piers Anthony books. And Sinedra said, you know, I'm going to stay here and not go to Riva on my birthday. And Queen Xantha said, no, you're not going to do that. If there is a treaty, you have to honor it. Partly because if you don't honor it, then the Dryads' treaty with the Tolnedrans might just fall through entirely because they're only protected as long as the ancestors of a certain Dryad stay with the House of Borun, and Sinedra is one of said ancestors. Also, let's see. I'm wondering if there was any clarification on exactly how old Sinedra is now, but looking at it, I don't think it narrowed it down. So she's either 14 or 15. Also, we got an interesting little bit about how apparently Zedar, the apostate, had passed through the Wood of the Dryads. Someone like that passed through the upper reaches of our wood last week and crossed over into Nyissa, Xantha said. If I'd known, we might have been able to detain him. Mr. Wolf asked if he was alone, and she replied no. He had 2 of the servants of Torak with him and a small boy. Wolf looked startled. A boy? Yes, about 6 years old. 6 years old or so. The old man frowned, and then his eyes opened very wide. So that's how he did it, he exclaimed. I never thought of that. And then we had a little bit of a discussion about whether it's ever acceptable to split the party, because apparently Mr. Wolf and Silk are going to go off to track Zedar on their own, while the rest of them, I think, are going to hop on a ship and meet them later. Hi. Good to see you. He comes over and brings me things that he'd like me to throw for him. And he drops them on my lap or on my chair. But I think maybe he's a little more preoccupied with chewing on this one than getting me to throw it for him. Maybe. Oh, no, never mind. He is right between my legs with it. Benedict does not care about fetch that much, but Finnegan very much cares about fetch. It's very important. Yes, hello. Look, pal, thank you, but I'm kind of busy. He comes up like right between my legs and then he tries to place his toy like between my knees as like a here, take it and throw it. All right, he's settled down at my feet. Maybe that'll be okay. Okay, I'm going to get into chapter 22 because I am excited for this chapter. Everybody ready? Well, too bad. I'm doing it anyways. Chapter 22. The next morning, before the sun rose, and while filmy mist still hovered beneath the limbs of the great oaks, Silk and Mr. Wolf made preparations to leave for Nyissa. Geryon sat on a log, somberly watching the old man bundle up some food. "Why so glum?" Wolf asked him. "I wish we didn't have to separate this way," Geryon said. "It's only for a couple of weeks." "I know, but I still wish," Geryon shrugged. "Keep an eye on your aunt for me while I'm gone," Wolf said. He spat his toy into my lap. It's just a little Kong chew toy thing that he found on a table. He saw it. This isn't his. It's Benevic's, but Benevik doesn't really care for it, so we had it up on a table just somewhere. And Finnegan, I hear Finnegan whining in the next room, just going, and I look over and he's sitting on the ground staring up at this up on the table. Like he saw it and he knew what it was, that it's a puppy toy, and he decided that I must have this. Chucky say, "Patoo." Yeah, that's what it was. Like he went pet and just plopped it on my lap. And he's back. Finnegan, buddy, pal, this isn't gonna work. All right, I'm gonna go back slightly. "I know, but I still wish," Geryon shrugged. "Keep an eye on your aunt for me while I'm gone," Wolf said, tying up his bundle. "All right." "And keep your amulet on. Nyssa's a dangerous place." "I'll remember," Geryon promised. "You'll be careful, won't you, grandfather?" The old man looked at him gravely, his white beard glistening in the misty light. "I'm always careful, Geryon," he said. "It's getting late, Belgarath," Silk called, leading two horses up to where the two of them were talking. Wolf nodded. "We'll see you in 2 weeks in the store," he said to Geryon. Geryon embraced the old man quickly, and then turned away so that he wouldn't have to watch the two of them leave. He crossed the clearing to where Mandaralin stood pensively looking out into the mist. "Parting is a melancholy business," the knight said moodily. He sighed. "It's more than that, though, isn't it, Mandaralin?" Geryon asked. "Thou art a perceptive lad." "What's been troubling you? You've been acting strangely for the last 2 days." "I have discovered a strange feeling within myself, Geryon, and I like it not." "Oh? What is it?" "Fear," Mandaralin said shortly. "Fear? Of what?" "The clay men." "The Zomboggies." "The clay men. I know not why, but their very existence struck a chill into my soul." "They frightened us all, Mandaralin," Geryon told him. "I have never been afraid before," Mandaralin said quietly. "Never?" "Not even as a child. The clay men made my very flesh creep, and I wanted most desperately to run away." "But you didn't," Geryon pointed out. "You stayed and fought." "That time, yes," Mandaralin admitted. "But what of next time?
Now that fear has found its way into my spirit, who can say when it might return? In some desperate hour, when the outcome of our quest hangs in the balance, might not vile fear lay its cold hand upon my heart and unman me? It is that possibility which doth gnaw upon my soul. I am sorely ashamed of my weakness and my fault. Ashamed? For being human? You're too hard on yourself, Manderallen. Thou art kind thus to excuse me, lad, but my failing is too grievous for such simple forgiveness. I have striven for perfection, and struck, I think, not too far off the mark. But now that perfection, which was the marvel of the world, is flawed. One sec. Finnegan, hey, buddy, it's over here. It's over here. What are you doing? Hey, he's staring up at the table that toy was on and barking. Okay, you all right? Serious moment too. Pharma says he got lost. Okay, he's just standing behind me with it. Let me restart that. Thou art kind thus to excuse me, lad, but my failing is too grievous for such simple forgiveness. I have striven for perfection, and struck, I think, not too far off the mark. But now that perfection, which was the marvel of the world, is flawed. It is a bitter thing to accept. He turned, and Geryon was startled to see tears standing in his eyes. Wilt thou assist me into mine armor? He asked. Of course. I feel profoundly the need to be encased in steel. 'Twill perchance strengthen my cowardly heart. You're not a coward, Geryon insisted. Manderallen sighed sadly. Only time can reveal that. The Sharkies think he needed to be taken down a peg for calling himself the marvel of the world. He's definitely got an ego, but he's also now quite upset. This is... Oh boy. This is a strange kind of bit here, right? Well, not strange, but Manderallen basically is admitting that he now has known fear for the first time in his entire life, including when he was a child. Which is something that I personally, can't imagine. Like, I can't remember the first time I was ever afraid. And even if I could, it wouldn't be the same thing, right? Because I wouldn't have grown through to adulthood before experiencing fear for the first time. So, I don't know. What's that like? What's it like being a full grown adult and experiencing fear for the first time ever? Farmos thinks that it'll be good for him, both from a overcoming it aspect, but also maybe it'll teach him more empathy. It's an interesting sort of thing. I don't know. And also, the Sharky saying you think he needed to be taken down a peg. Why, though? Why did he need to be taken down a peg? Because he had too much ego? Because, I mean, for what his ego was, so far it has been, not without some merit, right? Like, he has never been defeated, and he is proud of having never been defeated. And he had never known fear, and he was proud of never having known fear. So, is it ego to be proud of your accomplishments? Or to be... Because is he boastful about them? Or is he stating facts?
Like, if everything that he says is true, um, I don't know, is it wrong to be proud of that? To be proud of winning every fight you've ever been in? Or should you be humble about having won every fight you've ever been in? Because I think, yes, there's sort of a virtue to being humble, but also, I don't know if it's necessarily wrong to be proud of yourself for what you've accomplished. Minicake says crazy impossible, talking about the fear thing. Sharky say maybe not too far off from what Pharmo said. His ego was propped up by not having failed before, but now there's a chance for his confidence to be built off something stronger. Pharma says learning that fear isn't something to be ashamed of. Oh, learning that fear isn't something to be ashamed of, and that not having fear isn't something necessarily to be proud of, could be growing. It could, I assume, could be a growing opportunity. Yeah. I don't know. It's a tricky thing because I think that my instinct personally, like if I were just to go off my gut feeling, I'd be like, hey, this guy's too full of himself. Maybe failure will be good for him. But I don't know if that's necessarily really fair. Like, is that just me being kind of jealous because I've failed at things and so I think that everybody should fail at things? Um, like, if somebody could go through their entire life never failing at anything, is that really wrong? Is that something that, like, really we should want to take away from someone? I think the gut response is sort of rooting for that person to fail just because you want to see it happen. But I don't know if that's a good gut response. I think that might be kind of a moral failing on my part to want to see someone else fail. Um, I don't know. Sharky say he thought he was the best because he thought he couldn't lose. But is that the case? Did like he kind of said like that it was impossible for him to lose, but I think that's because he thought that he had trained his whole life and that possibly nobody else had his skill. And so far that's been true. We've never seen anybody, any human over or monster really. We've never seen anyone overcome that. And Mr. Wolf seemed to believe that that was the case. Um, so I don't know. I get what you're saying. Like I don't want to say you're wrong, because I don't 100% disagree with you. Because I'm tight. Sneezy puppy. But anyway, sorry, you're saying if he knows it's possible, he could still be the best at the things he's good at through work and skill. I mean, he was the best at what he was good at through work and skill, right? That's the main thing I think is it's not like he just fluked into this. Like he's trained his whole life, right? As far as we've been told, he has like his skill has come about. I'm sure partly through a natural inborn aptitude, right? Like he's got to be built to be that kind of fighter. Um, but he's also, he left his family and basically joined another family entirely just to train. Um, so I don't know. I have a little compassion for Mandaralin. Um, and I think it's a strange, like, I don't know. Trying to put it into like a real world context, if you had like an Olympic gold medalist who had trained their whole life and had never lost a sporting event, um, I think it's like I don't know, that person has earned the right, I think, to have some pride and say, hey, look, I'm the best at I don't know, tennis. Finnegan, what are you up to, pal? Stop rummaging. Boy. Sharky say, I think what most people in the real world would admit, though, is that some of success is luck. Right place at right time, etc. And to take all the credit for that is the issue. I don't know. I don't know. I understand what you mean. You've got to be given the opportunity and to, if Finnegan, hey, get out of there. Hey, Finnegan, out. Out. What are you doing? Stop it. Go. Shoo. Rummaging around. Okay, so if Mandaralin had been born a serf, he probably would not have become the greatest warrior in all the land, sort of thing. But he wasn't, and he did the training. But I don't think that Mandaralin has ever said that he is greater than anyone ever could be. He says that he is the greatest there is. Which is also kind of what Farmos is saying. And other people who have had the same opportunities as him are not as good. Yeah, I mean, other than they did not necessarily have the opportunity to train with the specific person. Let's take a look at what's happening here. What you doing? Well, now you think he's ashamed. He was staring up at that, I think at that plushie there, or those toys, and he's barking at them because he wants them. Oh, there he goes. I took him for a walk earlier. He's had some... Mister says he's the best around. No one would ever take him down. He looks at me, and then he looks back. Hi, Bear. Yeah, we've got a guest dog on the stream, and he's... Gesundheit. He's a little riled up, apparently, because he sees toys on the shelf behind me, and he wants them. Oh, I see. That he's the best around. Nobody ever gonna take him down. Yeah, I know what you... A more different... I don't know if there's a ball or just plushie toys. Here, you've got this right here. We were having, before I was interrupted by a puppy, Finnegan, no, don't go back there. Stop going back there. You start rummaging around back there. There's nothing back there for you. We were debating about if somebody is the best in the world at something. Is it like if somebody has gone their entire life and never lost at a particular thing, is it wrong for that person to be proud of that and to say that they're the best in the world and that they could not be defeated by, yeah. because we've got sort of a character in this book that's got that kind of attitude. He is the mightiest warrior in all the land. Nobody has ever successfully proven him wrong at that, and he's got some support in other people who presumably know what they're talking about, backing him up in that claim. But he's got kind of an ego about it. The good boy deserves them. And so we're kind of talking about whether that person, whether that character is wrong to have that kind of ego, because it does come across as an ego. Farmer says, the people who end up being the best are the ones who A, had access to the best teachers, and B, put in the most deliberate practice at the end. Finnegan! Enough! Hey! Enough! Finnegan is my brother's dog, and he is a very good boy. But right now, he's full of beans. You're full of beans, Finn. That's right, I said it. He's looking at me from kind of between this little gap down here. He's staring at me and then looking up at this table at something else that he wants. What do you want? Oh, I know what you want. You want this. This is what he was looking at, this, not the Kong toy. I misunderstood what he wanted before. I don't think he wanted the Kong toy. He wanted this rope toy. It's a big braided rope, and he's chewed on it before, and I guess it ended up on that table. This is what he wants. You want this? Can you take it and go be a good boy with it? And go chew on it down there? Okay? There you go. Alright, so this is my fault. I didn't know what he wanted. I misunderstood. He was just trying to let me know. Oh boy. How's Bear doing? I saw you were playing some more Deep Rock Galactic recently. Bear says, you can be proud. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It starts to become wrong when he keeps people from thinking they can't top him. Or if they refuse to teach how he became the best. That's an interesting take. Because that implies that if you are the best, you have an obligation to teach others. And I don't know if I agree with that. I think you should strongly think about it, especially if others have taught you. If he's just a selfish snob about it. No, well, he's currently on a quest, so he's not really currently in a position to teach others, except for anybody that happened to be with him, maybe. Sharky say to give others the opportunities you had. That is... I can see that point. Farmo says, except being good at something doesn't make you good at teaching it. Well, and being good at something and having trained yourself doesn't mean you necessarily currently have the opportunity to train others. But I suppose given that opportunity, given the time and students, it's probably a good idea. Assuming that the skills are something that should be passed on. Not so much an obligation, but gatekeeping knowledge. I see what you mean. And I think, I think I can't, 100% flat out agree, because it's not always going to be applicable. But I think frequently that is probably correct. I think frequently, if you are the best at something, if you have the ability to teach others, you probably should. Again, assuming that knowledge is something that should be passed on. Some knowledge, maybe not. I don't know. Because again, in this particular instance, we're talking about basically the knowledge on how to kill people and win in fights. And, alright, well, I'm a martial artist myself, but I don't train necessarily to hurt other people. I train because it's something I've always done, and I enjoy the actual training part of it. And I mean, self-defense is nice to have some confidence in, but Sharky say, I think it's about recognizing the efforts of others to get you to the top versus saying he pulled himself up by his own bootstraps. Which I don't think he necessarily claims that. Like, he has a great deal of respect for his teacher, who he essentially views as a father. Bear says, of course, some things should probably be taken to the grave. Yeah. There's probably some things. All right. Anyways, this particular character is just admitting that he has, for the first time in his entire life, including his childhood, only just felt fear for the first time. So he's kind of having a moment of, doubting himself, really. Because he doesn't have experience with fear, so he thinks that maybe he might flee battle as a result if it happens again. So that was a long digression there, or talk about that. I think we went on for like 20 minutes. But I don't know, it's a good talk. I appreciated that. I enjoyed that. All right, let me go back to where I was. Wilt thou assist me into mine armor? He asked. Of course. I feel profoundly the need to be encased in steel. 'Twill perchance strengthen my cowardly heart. You're not a coward, Garion insisted. Manderallen sighed sadly. Only time can reveal that. When it was time to leave, Queen Xantha spoke briefly to them. I wish you all well, she said. I'd help you in your search if possible, but a dryad's bound to her tree by ties which can't be broken. My tree here is very old, and I must care for him. It's interesting, she thinks of her tree, or knows her tree, as a him. Bear says a lot of deep rock for him. I think it's going to be your focus for now. Yeah, if it's fun. I've played a little bit of it. I played a little bit of it when I think it was out of beta when I played it, when it like had just launched. But it's been a while, and there's been some pretty big updates since then. She looked fondly up at the vast oak rising into the morning mist. We're in bondage to each other, but it's a bondage of love. Once again, Garion felt that same faint touch on his mind that he had experienced the day before when he had first seen the huge tree. There was a sense of farewell in that touch, and what seemed to be a warning. Queen Xantha exchanged a startled glance with Aunt Pole, and then looked at Garion rather closely. Some of my younger daughters will guide you to the river that marks the southern border of our wood, she continued. From there, your way to the sea is clear. Her voice showed no sign of any change, but her eyes seemed thoughtful. Sharky say, it must be why they refer to Garion as it, since the trees have already taken the place of he, him. Bear says, when a mommy tree and a daddy tree love each other very much. Would you believe we actually kind of established how that actually works in the previous chapter? In fact, in this case, it's not how it works. It's more along the lines of, when a dryad takes a traveler captive, Farmo says that's dryads, not trees. Okay, fair enough. Bear is referring to the tree husbandry comment Farmos made earlier. Alright. Thank you, Xantha, Aunt Pole said warmly, embracing the dryad queen. If you can send word to the Boruns that Senedra's safe and with me, it might relieve the Emperor's mind somewhat.
I will, Polgara, Xantha promised. They mounted, then, and followed the half-dozen or so dryads who flitted ahead of them like butterflies, guiding them southward into the forest. For some reason, Garion felt profoundly depressed, and he paid little attention to his surroundings as he rode beside Dernick along the winding forest trail. About mid-morning, it began to grow darker under the trees, and they rode in silence through the now somber wood. The warning Garion had seemed to hear in Queen Xantha's clearing echoed somehow in the creak of limbs and the rustling of leaves. The weather must be changing, Dernick said, looking up. I wish I could see the sky. Garion nodded and tried to shake off the sense of impending danger. Mandaralin, in his armor, and Barak, in his mail shirt, rode at the head of the party, and Hatar, in his horsehide jacket with steel plates riveted to it, rode at the rear. The ominous sense of foreboding seemed to have reached them all, and they rode warily, with their hands near their weapons and their eyes searching for trouble. Then, quite suddenly, Tolnedran legionnaires were all around them, rising from the bushes or stepping out from behind trees. They made no attempt to attack, but stood in their brightly polished breastplates with their short spears at the ready. Barak swore, and Mandaralin reined in his charger sharply. "Stand aside," he ordered the soldiers, lowering his lance.
"Easy,"
Barak cautioned. The dryads, after one startled look at the soldiers, melted into the gloomy woods. "What thinkest thou, Lord Barak?" Mandaralin asked blithely. "They cannot be over... My copy says an hundred. Over an hundred? I wonder if that's a dialectical thing or if that's a mistake. They cannot be over an hundred. What does the Sharky's copy say? They cannot be over an hundred. Shall we attack them? Yours also says an hundred. I wonder if that's correct in his style, or if that's just an error. Shall we attack them?
"One of these days, you and I are going to have a long talk about a few things,"
Barak said. He glanced back over his shoulder and saw that Hatar was edging closer. Then he sighed.
"Well, I suppose we might as well get on with it."
He tightened the straps on his shield and loosened his sword in his sheath.
"What do you think, Mandaralin? Should we give them a chance to run away?"
Sharkies think it's more a British style, anachronistic way of using an article before an H. Often here on CBC they say an historic. And Farmo says, for once Barak isn't the one suggesting violence first. 100 legionnaires, though. I don't know about that. From everything we've seen of the actual legionnaires, they seem pretty competent. If these were the slovenly tax collector types they encountered earlier, I don't know, or random bandits, even then 4 against 100 is pretty rough odds, but against legionnaires? A charitable suggestion, Lord Barak, Mandaralin agreed, about giving them a chance to run away. Then, some distance up the trail, a body of horsemen rode out from under the shadowy trees. Their leader was a large man wearing a blue cloak trimmed with silver. His breastplate and helmet were inlaid with gold, and he rode a prancing chestnut stallion whose hooves churned the damp leaves lying on the ground. "Splendid," he said as he rode up. "Absolutely splendid." Aunt Pole fixed the newcomer with a cold eye. "Don't the legions have anything better to do than to waylay travelers?" she demanded. "This is my legion, madam," the man in the blue cloak said arrogantly. Farmer says gold trim equals leader. Well, so he says. "And it does what I tell it to. I see that you have the Princess Senedra with you." "Where I go and with whom is my concern, your grace," Senedra said loftily. "It's no concern to the Grand Duke Cador of the House of Vordieu." Well, we've heard of him before. He could potentially be the next emperor, depending on how things pan out. "Your father is most concerned, Princess," Cador said. "All Tolnedra's searching for you. Who are these people?" Garion tried with a dark scowl and a shake of his head to warn her, but it was too late. "The two knights who lead our party are Sir Mandoralin, Baron of Vomandor, and Lord Barak, Earl of Trelheim," she announced. "The Algar warrior who guards our rear is Hatar, son of Chohag, chief of the clan chiefs of Algaria. The lady—" "I can speak for myself, dear," Aunt Pole said smoothly. "I'm curious to know what brings the Grand Duke of Vordieu so far into southern Tolnedra." "I have interests here, madam," Cador said. "Evidently," Aunt Pole replied. "All the legions of the Empire are searching for the princess, but it's I who have found her." "I'm amazed to find a Vorduvian so willing to aid in the search for a Boroon princess," Aunt Pole observed, "especially considering the centuries of enmity between your two houses." "Shall we cease this idle banter?" Cador suggested icily. "My motives are my own affair." "And unsavory, no doubt," she added. "I think you forget yourself, madam," Cador said. "I am, after all, who I am, and, more to the point, who I will become." "And who will you become, your grace?" she inquired. "I will be Ran Vordieu, Emperor of Tolnedra," Cador announced. So Ran, I guess, is the empirical title. "Oh? And just what's the future Emperor of Tolnedra doing in the Wood of the Dryads?" "I'm doing what's necessary to protect my interests," Cador said stiffly. "For the moment, it's essential that the Princess Senedra be in my custody." "My father may have something to say about that, Duke Cador," Senedra said, "and about this ambition of yours." Pharma says that makes more sense now. It's not that they were all named Ran, it was a title. Yeah. "What Ran Boroon says is of no concern to me, your highness," Cador told her. "Tolnedra needs me, and no Boroon trick is going to deny me the imperial crown. It's obvious that the old man plans to marry you to a Honeth or a Horbite to raise some spurious claim to the throne. That could complicate matters, but I intend to keep things simple." "By marrying me yourself?" Senedra asked scornfully. You'll never live that long. No, Cador said. I wouldn't be interested in a dryad wife. Unlike the Boruns, the House of Vordu believes in keeping its line pure and uncontaminated.
Ooh. That's a thing that he said. That's a thing that he said. Ugh. You know that was intentional. That phrasing. Farmo says he's getting more appealing by the sentence. Yeah, that's rough. That's not good.
So, you're going to hold me prisoner? Sinedra asked. That'd be impossible, I'm afraid, Duke Cador told her. The Emperor has ears everywhere. It's really a shame you ran away just when you did, Your Highness. I'd gone to a great expense to get one of my agents into the Imperial kitchen and to obtain a quantity of a rare Nissen poison. I'd even taken the trouble to compose a letter of sympathy to your father. How considerate of you, Sinedra said, her face turning pale. Unfortunately, I'll have to be more direct now, Cador went on. A sharp knife and a few feet of dirt should end your unfortunate involvement in Tolnedran politics. I'm very sorry, Princess. There's nothing personal in it, you understand. But I have to protect my interests.
Nothing personal. Farmo says at least he's being upfront about his awfulness.
Thy plan, Duke Cador, hath one small flaw, Mandaralin said, carefully leaning his lance against a tree. I fail to see it, Baron, Cador said smugly.
Oh. The auto-moderator caught the Sharkies saying, I'm going to murder you, nothing personal. I was like, why is that coming up red? Apparently my auto-moderator thought, hey, let's flag this as possibly suggesting violence.
Thy plan, Duke Cador, hath one small flaw, Mandaralin said, carefully leaning his lance against a tree. I fail to see it, Baron, Cador said smugly. Thine error lay in rashly coming within reach of my sword, Mandaralin told him. Thy head is forfeit now, and a man with no head has little need of a crown.
Nice.
Garion knew that a part of Mandaralin's brashness arose from his desperate need to prove to himself that he was no longer afraid.
Sharky say no barracks allowed because of the auto mod. I gotcha.
Cador looked at the knight apprehensively. You wouldn't do that, he said without much certainty. You're too badly outnumbered. Thou art imprudent to think so, Mandaralin said. I am the hardiest knight on life, and fully armed. Thy soldiers will be as blades of grass before me. Thou art doomed, Cador. And with that, he drew his great sword.
It was bound to happen,
Barak said wryly to Hetar, and drew his own sword.
I don't think we'll do that,
a new voice announced harshly. A familiar, black-robed man rode out from behind a nearby tree on a sable-colored horse. He muttered a few quick words and gestured sharply with his right hand. Geryon felt a dark rush and a strange roaring in his mind. Mandaralen's sword spun from his grip. "My thanks, Asherak," Cador said in a relieved tone. "I hadn't anticipated that." Mandaralen pulled off his mailed gauntlet and nursed his hand as if he had been struck a heavy blow. Hetar's eyes narrowed, and then went strangely blank. The Murgo's black mount glanced curiously at him once, and then looked away almost contemptuously. "Well, Shadar," Asherak gloated with an ugly smirk on his scarred face, "would you like to try that again?" Hetar's face had a sick look of revulsion on it. "It's not a horse," he said. "It looks like a horse, but it's something else." "Yes," Asherak agreed. "Quite different, really. You can sink yourself into its mind if you want, but I don't think you'll like what you find there." He swung down from his saddle and walked toward them, his eyes burning. He stopped in front of Aunt Pole and made an ironic bow. "And so we meet again, Polgara." "You've been busy, Chamdar," she replied. Cador, in the act of dismounting, seemed startled. "You know this woman, Asherak?" "His name is Chamdar, Duke Cador," Aunt Pole said. Okay, so according to Aunt Pole, Asherak is the pseudonym, and Chamdar is his actual name. "His name is Chamdar, Duke Cador," Aunt Pole said, "and he's a Grolim priest. You thought he was only buying your honor, but you'll soon find that he's brought it says he's brought, but I suspect it's supposed to be he's bought much more than that." Sharky say, "Real name, Evil Hank." And Farmo says, "Milady," Asherak tipping his fedora to Polgara. Wow. Yeah, we don't like Asherak very much, do we? "You'll soon find that he's bought much more than that." She straightened in her saddle, the white lock at her brow suddenly incandescently bright. "You've been an interesting opponent, Chamdar. I'll almost miss you." "Don't do it, Polgara," the Grolim said quickly. "I've got my hand around the boy's heart. The instant you start to gather your will, he'll die. I know who he is and how much you value him." Her eyes narrowed. "An easy thing to say, Chamdar." "Would you like to test it?" he mocked. "Get down off your horses," Cador ordered sharply, and the legionnaires all took a threatening step forward. "Do as he says," Aunt Pole ordered quietly. "It's been a long chase, Polgara," Chamdar said. "Where's Belgarath?" "Not far," she told him. "Perhaps if you start running now, you can get away before he comes back." "No, Polgara," he laughed. "I'd know if he were that close." He turned and looked intently at Geryon. "You've grown, boy. We haven't had a chance to talk for quite some time, have we?" Geryon stared back at the scarred face of his enemy, alert, but strangely not afraid. The contest between them, for which he had been waiting all his life, was about to begin, and something, deep within his mind, told him that he was ready. Chamdar looked into his eyes, probing.
He doesn't know, does he?
He asked Aunt Pole. And then he laughed.
How like a woman you are, Polgara.
Ugh. Give that one more.
Oh, boy. How like a woman you are, Polgara. You've kept the secret from him simply for the sake of the secret itself. I should have taken him away from you years ago.
Sharkies say, how like one? And Farmo says, fedora! And just try and refocus the camera lens. Back here. Back here. No, come on. I feel so goofy doing this. Like, it's only because it has worked. Maybe if I close this entirely, give it a second to focus, and then open it back up. Did that work? No, that didn't work. Well, I'm going to leave it for now and just keep reading. All right.
You've kept the secret from him.
The secret. Interesting.
You've kept the secret from him simply for the sake of the secret itself. I should have taken him away from you years ago.
Leave him alone, Chamdar, she ordered. He ignored that.
What's his real name, Polgara? Have you told him yet?
That doesn't concern you, she said flatly.
She's not denying it.
But it does, Polgara. I've watched over him almost as carefully as you have.
He laughed again.
You've been his mother, but I've been his father. Between us, we've raised a fine son, but I still want to know his real name.
She straightened. I think this has gone far enough, Chamdar, she said coldly. What are your terms?
No terms, Polgara, the Grolim answered. You and the boy and I are going to the place where Lord Torak awaits the moment of his awakening. My hand will be about the boy's heart the entire time, so you'll be suitably docile. Zedar and Tuchik are going to destroy each other fighting over the orb, unless Belgarath finds them first and destroys them himself. But the orb doesn't really interest me. It's been you and the boy I've been after from the very beginning.
You weren't really trying to stop us then? She asked.
Chamdar laughed. Stop you? I've been trying to help you. Tuchik and Zedar both have underlings here in the west. I've delayed and deceived them at every turn, just so you could get through. I knew that sooner or later Belgarath would find it necessary to pursue the orb alone, and when that happened, I could take you and the boy.
For what purpose?
You still don't see? He asked. The first two things Lord Torak sees when he awakens will be his bride and his mortal enemy kneeling in chains before him. I'll be exalted above all for so royal a gift.
Let the others go, then, she said.
The others don't concern me, Chamdar said. I'll leave them with the noble Kador. I don't imagine he'll find it convenient to keep them alive, but that's up to him. I've got what I want.
You swine! Aunt Pole raged helplessly. It's the first time we've heard her described like that. You filthy swine!
Everybody ready?
With a bland smile, Chamdar slapped her sharply across the face.
You really must learn to control your tongue, Polgara, he said.
Garion's brain seemed to explode. Dimly, he saw Dernick and the others being restrained by the legionnaires, but no soldier seemed to consider him a danger. He started toward his enemy without thinking, reaching for his dagger.
Not that way.
It was that dry voice in his mind that had always been there, but the voice was no longer passive, disinterested.
I'll kill him,
Garion said silently in the vaults of his brain.
Not that way,
the voice warned again.
They won't let you, not with your knife.
How then?
Remember what Belgarath said, the will and the word.
I don't know how. I can't do that.
You are who you are. I'll show you. Look.
Unbidden, and so clearly that it was almost as if he were watching it happen, the image of the god Torak, writhing in the fire of Aldor's orb, rose before his eyes. He saw Torak's face melting and his fingers aflame. Then the face shifted and altered until it was the face of the Dark Watcher, whose mind had been linked with his for as long as he could remember. He felt a terrible force building in him as the image of Chamdar, wrapped in seething flame, stood before him.
Now,
the voice commanded him.
Do it!
It required a blow. His rage would be satisfied with nothing less. He leaped at the smirking Grolim so quickly that none of the legionnaires could stop him. He swung his right arm, and at the instant his palm struck Chamdar's scarred left cheek, he felt all the force that had built in him surge out from the silvery mark on his palm. "Burn!" he commanded, willing it to happen. Taken off guard, Chamdar jerked back. A momentary anger began to appear on his face, and then his eyes widened with an awful realization. For an instant, he stared at Garion in absolute horror, and then his face contorted with agony.
No!
He cried out hoarsely, and then his cheek began to smoke and seethe where the mark on Garion's hand had touched it. Wisps of smoke drifted from his black robe as if it had suddenly been laid on a red-hot stove. Then he shrieked and clutched at his face. His fingers burst into flame. He shrieked again and fell writhing to the damp earth. "Stand still!" It was Aunt Pole's voice this time, sounding sharply inside Garion's head. Chamdar's entire face was engulfed in flames now, and his shrieks echoed in the dim wood. The legionnaires recoiled from the burning man, and Garion suddenly felt sick. He started to turn away. "Don't weaken," Aunt Pole's voice told him. "Keep your will on him." Garion stood over the blazing Grolim. The wet leaves on the ground smoked and smoldered where Chamdar thrashed and struggled with the fire that was consuming him. Flames were spurting from his chest, and his shrieks grew weaker. With an enormous effort, he struggled to his feet and held out his flaming hands imploringly to Garion. His face was gone, and greasy black smoke rolled off his body, drifting low to the ground.
"Master," he croaked, "have mercy."
Garion's heart wrenched with pity. All the years of that secret closeness between them pulled at him. "No!" Aunt Pole's stern voice commanded him. "He'll kill you if you release him." "I can't do it," Garion said. "I'm going to stop it." As once before, he began to gather his will. feeling it build in him like some vast tide of pity and compassion. He half reached toward Chamdar, focusing his thought on healing. Garion! Aunt Pole's voice rang. It was Chamdar who killed your parents! The thought forming in his mind froze. Chamdar killed Garan and Ildera. He burned them alive, just as he's burning now. Avenge them, Garion. Keep the fire on him. All the rage and fury he had carried within him since Wolf had told him of the deaths of his parents flamed in his brain. The fire, which a moment before he had almost extinguished, was suddenly not enough. The hand he had begun to reach out in compassion stiffened. In terrible anger he raised it, palm out. A strange sensation tingled in that palm, and then his own hand burst into flames. There was no pain, not even a feeling of heat, as a bright blue fire burst from the mark on his hand and wreathed up through his fingers. The blue fire became brighter, so bright that he could not even look at it. Even in the extremity of his mortal agony, Chamdar the Grolim recoiled from that blazing hand. With a hoarse, despairing cry, he tried to cover his blackened face, staggered back a few steps, and then, like a burning house, he collapsed in upon himself and sank back to earth. It is done! Aunt Pole's voice came again. They are avenged! And then her voice rang in the vaults of his mind with soaring exultation. Belgarian, she sang. My Belgarian! Ashen-faced Cador, trembling in every limb, backed in horror from the still burning heap that had been Chamdar the Grolim. Sorcery! He gasped. Indeed, Aunt Pole said coolly. I don't think you're ready for this kind of game yet, Cador. The frightened legionnaires were also backing away, their eyes bulging at what they had just seen. I think the Emperor's going to take this whole affair rather seriously, Aunt Pole told them. When he hears that you were going to kill his daughter, he'll probably take it personally. It wasn't us, one of the soldiers said quickly. It was Cador. We were just following orders. He might accept that as an excuse, she said doubtfully. If it were me, though, I'd take him some kind of gift to prove my loyalty. Something appropriate to the circumstances. She looked significantly at Cador. Several of the legionnaires took her meaning, drew their swords, and moved into position around the Grand Duke. What are you doing? Cador demanded of them. I think you've lost more than a throne today, Cador, Aunt Pole said. You can't do this, Cador told the legionnaires. One of the soldiers put the point of his sword against the Grand Duke's throat. We're loyal to the Emperor, my lord, he said grimly. We're placing you under arrest for high treason, and if you give us any trouble, we'll settle for just delivering your head to Tol Honeth, if you take my meaning. I don't know if there's much meaning to take there, Mr. Legionnaire. I think you pretty much just said bluntly what your
what you think you're implying. One of the Legion officers knelt respectfully before Sinedra.
Your Imperial Highness, he said to her, how may we serve you?
The princess, still pale and trembling, drew herself up.
Deliver this traitor to my father, she said in a ringing voice, and tell him what happened here. Inform him that you have arrested the Grand Duke Cador at my command. At once, your highness, the officer said, springing to his feet. Chain the prisoner, he ordered sharply, then turned back to Sinedra. May we provide you an escort to your destination, your highness? That won't be necessary, Captain, she told him. Just remove this traitor from my sight. As your highness wishes. Wishes, the captain said with a deep bow. He gestured sharply, and the soldiers led Cador away. Garion was staring at the mark on his palm. There was no sign of the fire that had burned there. Dernick, released now from the grip of the soldiers, looked at Garion, his eyes wide. Sharky say, well, that escalated quickly. I thought I knew you, he whispered. Who are you, Garion, and how did you do this? Dear Dernick, Aunt Pole said, fondly, touching his arm. Still willing to believe only what you can see. Garion's the same boy he's always been. You mean it was you? Dernick looked at Chamdar's body and pulled his eyes quickly away. Of course, she said. You know Garion. He's the most ordinary boy in the world. But Garion knew differently. The will had been his, and the word had come from him. Keep still, her voice warned inside his head. No one must know. Why did you call me Belgarian? He demanded silently. Because it's your name, her voice replied. Now try to act natural, and don't bother me with questions. We'll talk about it later. And then her voice was gone. The others stood around awkwardly until the legionnaires left with Cador. Then, when the soldiers were out of sight, and the need for imperial self-possession was gone, Sinedra began to cry. Aunt Pole took the tiny girl in her arms and began to comfort her.
I guess we'd better bury this,
Barak said, nudging what was left of Chamdar with his foot.
The dryads might be offended if we went off and left it still smoking.
I'll fetch my spade, Dernick said. Garion turned away and brushed past Mandorowland and Hetar. His hands were trembling violently, and he was so exhausted that his legs barely held him. She had called him Belgarian, and the name had rung in his mind as if he had always known that it was his. As if, for all his brief years, he had been incomplete, until in that instant the name itself had completed him. But Belgarian was a being who with will and word and the touch of his hand could turn flesh into living fire. You did it, he accused the dry awareness in one corner of his mind. No, the voice replied. I only showed you how. The will and the word and the touch were all yours. Garion knew that it was true. With horror, he remembered his enemy's final supplication and the flaming, incandescent hand with which he had spurned that agonized appeal for mercy. The revenge he had wanted so desperately for the past several months was dreadfully complete, but the taste of it was bitter, bitter. Then his knees buckled, and he sank to the earth and wept like a broken-hearted child. We've reached the end of part 2. That was a big chapter. Not necessarily the longest chapter, but possibly the most important and most eventful and, I don't know, most roller coaster one we've had. Probably out of both books so far, between Pawn of Prophecy and Queen of Sorcery. Whew. That was kind of rough, wasn't it? Belgarian. Following a certain pattern. Any doubts he had about whether or not he could do magic, those are going to be gone. Not the most pleasant start to that, apparently. As Farmo says, my heart hurts for his loss of innocence. Poor Garion. Sharky's definitely had a how are they going to get out of this one feeling. Yeah, it was set up to be kind of bleak there for a little bit, wasn't it? 100 Legionnaires, Grand Duke Cador, Asherak, all in one place, all enemies. And we had Barak, Mandaralan, and Hetar to fight them off. Did I say 4 before? I guess if you count Dernick, maybe. Because Silk's not there, so... Garion has not really done any real fighting with a weapon yet, other than maybe like a piece of wood. And, oh yeah, and that's not a horse. It looks like a horse, but it's something different. Yeah, that was Hetar looking sick, as he says it. Yeah, that was an interesting moment. I guess they kind of... they didn't really say what happened to that creature. Did it also burn? Also, Chamdar slapped Aunt Pole and then immediately died, because you don't do that. Yep, that was a big chapter. That was kind of intense. Sharky say there's been precedent that once a Golem dies, his magic fades. You're presuming that the horse was a creation of his magic. We don't really have confirmation about that. Apparently it had a mind for Hetar to touch. But, I mean, who knows? Maybe it just ran off. Maybe it also died. So yeah, that was a lot. I don't really know what else to say about that. Farmo says, I feel like Garion's feelings right now. I don't think Aunt Pole has understood them. Like, she acted like he would be fine. Or at least not possibly broken a bit. Which is tricky with Aunt Pole, because normally she's the one that understands when other people are having emotional crises. You know, she's the one to comfort Sinedra, or hold back Hetar, or talk down Barak.
Um, Sharky say maybe she doesn't know the extent of his mental roller coaster. You would think that she would know better than anyone. But also, I think in this particular case, she's going through some emotional things herself. Because I think we saw more emotions from her in this chapter than we have before. We had her raging, we had her exultant, and normally she's pretty cool and collected. Formo says magic is such a part of her, so maybe she doesn't understand how much this is changing his sense of self. That's possible. And it's possible, yeah, that this is just a weak point in her capability. Or maybe she doesn't remember not having it. Well, and from what you may not remember, but in one of the prologues, it kind of mentioned her being marked, and I think it was when she was just a baby. She had the mark, the white hair was marked on her head. And she was with Belgarath and I think Aldur at that time, so she probably, like, was treated, as a sorceress from infancy. So she may not have really had a time where she wasn't learning magic. Maybe. Maybe we'll find out about that later.
No problem.
What?
Take care.
That wasn't for you. That was weird. She also may not remember the first time she killed someone, says Farmos. Yes, Garion has never killed someone that I can remember. No, I don't think so. He's maybe struck someone with a club or his fist. And he's been taught how to fight somewhat, but yeah. Sharky say he's killed a pig. That's true. He killed a boar. Yeah, Garion is going to be going through a lot. And Mandralen's going through a lot. Big chapter. I don't know, I feel like there's a lot to unpack from this one chapter. Well, I'm definitely not going to start part 3, Nyssa, today. We'll save that for next Wednesday. Armo says everybody needs a few therapy sessions. Yeah. But it was an exciting chapter, wasn't it? I have noticed, as reading these books, that when the emotional scenes happen, I definitely am feeling them personally more intensely reading them out loud. Sharky say, Dernick's going through a lot. He just saw someone he thought he knew throw a sick burn at Chamdar. Yeah, and it's... I feel like it's easy to look badly at Dernick recently. He's been pretty judgmental and prudish a lot recently. And then, his gut reaction to be like, who are you? After seeing what just happened, doesn't paint him in the best light. He's been like, he was a smith in Sendaria his whole life. And he dropped that to protect Garion and Aunt Pole, just left his entire life behind to go off on this adventure with them. And then he's been to see various kings and emperors. He's met 3 kings at least. 4? More than that even. Let's see. He's met the king of Sendaria, the king of Cherek, the king of Drasnia, the Revan Warder, the king of Erendia, and the emperor of Tolnidra. So he's I mean, even if you don't count the Revan Warder, he's met 4 kings and an emperor. At least. Assuming I'm not forgetting anybody. I think that's it. Um, he's killed someone himself. So Dernick has been through a lot, but we don't really necessarily get that kind of pointed out to us in that particular fashion. Farmo says Polgara's tried to make it seem like it was her, but he's got to be suspicious. And like so many of the people who he knew have turned out to not be who he thought they were. So you could see him being like, had Garion been hiding who he was from me? Yeah. Sharky say he's slowly coming out of the naivety he grew up with. Is it even, would you consider that naivety? You think that's like a fair thing to say? I mean, lots and lots of people grow up, take up a profession, do that for their whole lives. You know, maybe get married, maybe have kids, maybe don't. And that's their life, right? Shelteredness. And I would say the majority of people don't need to fight for their lives on the road and then meet kings and see magic done before them. You know, he's been through a lot. Farmos and Sharky say maybe shelteredness. I suppose. I don't know. I think like maybe you could consider that sheltered compared to where he's at now. But if that had been his entire life, like being a smith, working on wagons and hoes and shovels and rakes and all that, if that had been his life and he lived that, like that until he passed away, would that be a sheltered life, do you think? It would be, you know, a peaceful life. But I don't know. I don't know. Maybe. Farmhouse says he has a pretty normal life and he's been thrown into like a different dimension. Yeah. Yeah. Sharky say, I guess it's just us who are used to fantasy looking down our noses at someone who isn't used to being in the wider world. Yeah, that's fair. I mean, in the context, this is like a fantasy novel, an adventure, you know, swords and sorcery book. So we don't necessarily, it's not important to treat these people like they are real living beings. They're not. Sharky say, get used to your own genre, Dernick. There are some puppy snores. I thought I heard something, but I didn't know what it was. All right. Well. So, there is still maybe a little less than a quarter of this book left. And then there are 3 more books after this one. And our point of reference for this entire world, young Garion, has just in the span of a few pages changed quite dramatically. So the books were going a certain way before, but what do you think? Are they going to keep going like that? Do you think this chapter's? Do you think it's significant? Do you think the rest of the books are going to go in a different direction than you might have predicted? Sharky say, pet snores. I've heard Stormy snore before. Adorbs. Stormy, your kitty. Farmo says, no, it's going to be the same as before. Sharky's ask, would we have a momentous reveal like this in every book? I suppose the biggest reveal in Pawn of Prophecy was probably the identity of Aunt Pole and Mr. Wolf, right? And maybe a little bit of their... Did we get their tie to Garion? in Pawn of Prophecy, or was that at the beginning of Queen of Sorcery? I think, no, yeah, that was in Pawn of Prophecy. So that was a pretty big reveal. I don't know if I would consider that as big as this one, because I feel like this, this possibility was foreshadowed a bit, but maybe not as much as their identities were. So that one I was kind of okay. To be fair, the first time I read the book, I didn't see it coming, but I was much younger then. But this event, I feel like you said, it was, it escalated quickly. Like ambush in what we thought was a relatively safe Dryad forest. Like, yeah, the mudmen attacked them there, but that was unusual, right? You didn't kind of expect it to happen twice, right? In D&D, like if you're I guess, if you're traveling one encounter from point A to point B, I suppose this is a different, they got to point B and then they started a new journey, but still it was inside the Dryad forest. That didn't feel, it felt like it should have been a safe place, especially after they met Queen Xantha. So you had this unexpected Duke Cador all of a sudden, who we've heard about repeatedly. I don't know if we expected to meet him, especially with 100 legionnaires at his back. Or front. And, I almost had forgotten that bit, yeah. And then Asherak. Again, Asherak, but this time actually taking action against them. Threatening and saying he's going to drag them off to Torak. I don't know, that was a lot. Alright. I'm going to keep talking around this in circles if I don't end things somewhere. So, this is going to be the place, I think. So I think I'm going to raid out... Sharky say no one expects the Spanish Inquisition. I'm going to raid out to my friend Alex, Chip Alex, who is playing Monster Hunter World now. He's done with Elden Ring and he's on to Monster Hunter World, which is a fun game. I've played a fair amount of it in the past. But yeah, so thanks. I hope this was exciting for everybody. Like I was saying before, these like emotional bits, especially the bits with adrenaline, but I don't know. These emotional bits are tough to read out loud without like getting myself all worked up and emotional. It's interesting. I don't feel like I felt as strongly when reading it to myself, when reading it silently. But yeah, so I'm gonna raid out to Mr. Chip Alex. And yeah, have a good weekend, everyone. Hopefully, some relaxing maybe, some productivity maybe, whatever you want to do. And we'll see you next Wednesday. All right. Have a good night.